Next talk is a very, very interesting talk. How do you apply lasers post multifocal IOL implantation? And none other than Dr. Theo Seiler.
You know, I would have loved to give that talk right after the talk of Mr. Shetty this morning, because it would have nicely fit into his approach and his question, shall we do it this way or the other way? We selected the way number 2, and you see why in a second. You know, before we start to think about trifocals, we have to learn or to think about how this multifocal stuff works. In essence, we do have 2 or even 3 of those images that are projected at the same site on the retina. So in essence, if you have a target in 5-meter distance, you can see that, oops. Oh, sorry, the loop is here. Oh yeah. You can see in 5-meter distance, you can see that you create a sharp image from the distance part of the lens, but an unsharp, superimposed image of the near part. So in essence, we are always creating a huge disaster in the cornea using this multifocal IOLs, which has to be cleaned by neural processing. So decoding that damned image into sharp and unsharp image that is done in on and off centers, and then transported that rudiment information to the visual cortex, which is building up then the image in the brain. During that process, decoding and coding, we are cleaning that picture up and get only the sharp image. The non-sharp is suppressed. Have in mind that this is a process that takes place between the retina and the cortex, and if none of those 2 images is sharp, that process does not work. So in patients who have an astigmatism where none of those is sharp, that will not work. Or if you have a multifocal cornea, like after hyperopia correction, for example, with a huge Q factor, that will not work because none of those images is sharp. Then the multifocal lens will not give you the full spectrum of benefit, but the full spectrum of side effects. And that is not beneficial for the patient either. Most of those lenses, the multifocal effect is theoretically independent of the pupil size, and most of those multifocal IOLs today are apodized. What does the apodization mean? The apodization means that here in the center, at 2 millimeters area, you have 40% of the light is in the distance vision focus, 30 is in the near vision focus, and 20 is in the intermediate distant focus. So as the pupil goes wider, on a sudden the near visual acuity, or the near part decreases, and the far increases, which means that you are a little bit more myopic in the central area of the multifocal and less myopic, or not myopic, in the periphery, which in wavefront language means that you create a spherical aberration. You are more myopic in the inner part and less myopic in the outer part, which is clearly a kind of spherical aberration. We have to have this in mind when selecting then the corrections later on. So, unfortunately, although this is a huge and a nice tool to play with for eye doctors, unfortunately the patients do not see it that way. About 15 to 25% of the patients are not happy with their multifocals. And although you always find some publications that have 95, 96% satisfaction, that is not our personal experience. In about 75% they are satisfied, but the rest is not. And and most of the reasons are, is the residual astigmatism of 0.5 diopter and more, a spherical error of more than a quarter diopter up and down, or an anisometropy between the eyes. And that is Moorfields Eye Hospital published in 3 years ago a work on the trifocal IOLs, and they had a 25% fraction of dissatisfied patients, which is a lot. And remember what I mentioned yesterday, every satisfied patient brings you 4 new patients. Every dissatisfied patient inhibits 16 patients to come to you. So on a long-term run, if you continue like that with 25% dissatisfied patients, you're running out of patients. Now, we did a retrospective study just to find out what is going on. We had 213 eyes with the multifocal. Is Damien Gattinel here? Unfortunately not. He is the inventor of that IOL that we are using for fine vision of physiology. He invented it and designed it. So we had 213 eyes in 108 patients. The pre-op astigmatism, we included up to 2 diopters. Have this in mind. That is unusual for multifocals, but since we are going to do a LASIK anyway, we can include that. We had 42 patients with 56 eyes were dissatisfied. They were not happy at all. And this is now, if you're from 400, you can see 56 of 200 is about 25%. And they were not satisfied. If you have a scale with 1 not at all and 4 totally dissatisfied, that was just 2.1, which means they are moderately dissatisfied. Not. Are you testing your eyes? And these patients asked improvement. Those patients asking for refractive improvement, at least in one eye. That was about 39% of the cases, but only 26% of the eyes. And the reasons that we could identify was astigmatism of more than half of a diopter, myopia in 45%, hyperopia, and in about 12%, we couldn't find a refractive error at all. They were at 0, but they were just not happy. And then we did aberrometry, and oops, it was a high-order aberration, high-order aberrations of more than 0.5 microns. I would like to show you how these modern wavefront sensors are looking like. It's not like in the old days where you could not identify the rings. Here you can. Look there. You can easily see the rings of the intraocular lens nicely. And this is a patient who had some astigmatism. You can see here, plus 0.4, minus. She had primarily astigmatism, but also a high order aberration of 0.35. And then you see the point spread function is terrible, and also she has a blurred vision. So now, since we do have a selective wavefront guided treatment, we could go on and do all those, taking all those aberrations, like here, sphere, low order, and astigmatism, but also coma, because the lens was slightly decentered. You do have trefoil due to shrinkage of the capsule, maybe. You do have spherical aberration, maybe due to apodization. Astigmatism of second order, all those things you can have. And that's what we did then. And if you correct all important high order aberrations, look at this point spread function down there. We are really nicely creating a spot with a little bit of a halo, but not too much. The high order aberration is down at 0.15. However, we don't have any spherical aberration in the center anymore. See, nothing is going on. So we killed the apodization effect. There is not more power in the center compared to the periphery anymore. And that's why in those cases, and that's why we called it selective wavefront guided treatment, we just did it the way that we left the spherical aberration of first and second order alone. And you may see it here in the center that we do have some stronger power, some spherical aberration in the central area. Now, how did this, and also you can see that the pictures are, the images are still a little bit blurred, but this is something that the brain can easily compensate. Now, The nice thing is those patients, the satisfaction score increased from 2.1 to 3.6, and 38% of our 42 patients would choose the procedure again, although it was cataract surgery, then LASIK, and all these measurements before and afterwards, and still they thought it was worthwhile to undergo that procedure. You may see easily that the astigmatism that was up to 2 diopters here did decrease to 0.75 diopter. The majority had less than 0.5 diopters. Here, that's about 90%. Also, the sphere is pretty much okay. There is a little bit of myopia left, but this was done on purpose because the patient preferred, in the contact lens testing, a little bit of myopia in the non-dominant eye, but there's not much hyperopia over there anymore. We did not lose any letters in the ETDRS chart, so one line worse was about, I think it was 2 patients. And those patients, and now we come to the negative side effects, were ladies who had a dry eye before we did the LASIK, which we thought we should exclude. And we did in many cases. If somebody came in with a very dry eye, we said, hey, that's not a good procedure for you. But these 2 we missed, and then we were in trouble. And those were exactly those 4% of the patients that were unhappy. Some people also has gained some lines, 2 lines and more, but that was not the real reason why we did it. Now, at the end of the day, we have 2 souls in our heart. One is the business soul, and one is the medical soul. And even if we do a good job in the medical soul, the business soul is sometimes a little bit unhappy about my decisions. In this case, we had to justify that extra cost, and we have to offer this to our patients. You know, we are offering today our patients, if somebody comes in and gets a multifocal IOL, they always get the LASIK afterwards for free. It's not free. We calculate this already and put it in the package, of course. But here you can see the cost of the femtosecond LASIK in Switzerland. Everything is more expensive there, and you can make it much cheaper here. Costs about 1,500 Swiss francs, and about 25%, 26% of the eyes with the multifocal get then a LASIK, which means 26 is 390 Swiss francs. And so we created that package. You get the multifocal, you get the femtosecond laser, and you get the femto LASIK for free afterwards, and that's about 3,000 Swiss francs. And patients are buying it easily because people can afford that. So, and that's something you have to recalculate yourself and build it in, which makes sense. In conclusion, we believe that the satisfaction rate, the satisfaction rate of multifocal IOLs has to be improved, or you select your patients very carefully, which you obviously do. Sometimes I'm missing that. So, nevertheless, because I'm seeing so many patients, if that selection is not done properly, which in big companies, in big clinics you cannot do yourself, you may be faced to do a LASIK afterwards. The package includes multifocal LASIK for free to correct residual refractive errors. And at IROC, that is our clinic, this package calculates, well, if we add 390 Swiss francs, and the patient will not be able to see for what he actually paid. Thank you very much for your attention.